Hi everybody, welcome back to Kielbasa Corner, where today I've got something a bit different for you because I am doing a barbecue competition, which is not something that I ever do. I just don't need that kind of stress in my life, and I see myself as more of a mentor than a competitor. But some friends asked for some help, and it's for a good cause, and I am all about that. Now it turns out this is an all beef rib and or brisket competition, and we chose to go with just the ribs. Since it was fairly short notice and I have to work the day before that, I am not gonna have time to mess around with briskets. And there was not a lot of detail, and I was really kind of hoping for some nice meaty plate ribs, those big dino ribs. But when the meat arrived, it turns out it is these very well picked through back ribs. I mean, I never mess with these things. These are essentially soup bones, in my opinion. So I do have my work cut out for me to make something that is edible out of these. There's only a couple of bites of meat on these things. So I am just gonna do my thing and have as much fun as I can with these, make something completely unique that nobody's ever tried before, because I would rather sink the ship making something completely original than make something that's run-of-the-mill. So I'm gonna cure these things because that is what I do. So as usual, when I'm curing things, the first thing I'm gonna need to do is weigh these up, and then I'm gonna have to just estimate how much meat is on these to figure the amount of cure and salt and everything, and that is not a lot. Geez, I'm gonna say there's probably 10% meat on the bone on these. Wow. Okay. No worries, we're gonna figure it out. Well, this came out to just under 14 kilograms of ribs. And I have just got to estimate that there is about 10% of meat on these bones. So the actual number that I'm going to be using is 1,387 grams of meat. And the next thing I've got to do is figure out how much water it takes to cover these ribs, and I'll use the weight of that water and the weight of the meat to calculate how much salt, sugar, and cure to use in the solution. And with these, I'm gonna go with a 1.75% salt solution. I'll use the same amount of sugar, and as usual, the cure percentage will be 0.25%. And that is of the total weight of the salt, sugar, water, and meat for that cure concentration. Come on. That was very lucky, because I'm using 18 liters of water to cover this, and that 18 liters of water combined with my estimated 1,387 grams of meat that is on these bones. That's a crazy ratio. 1.75% of that is 340 grams of salt. And that just turns out to be exactly what I've got in the house. So this might be fate. So let me get this in my last bucket of water here. I'm going to use the same amount of sugar. And now for the cure, and this is the pink cure number 1, and this is going to be just one of the things that hopefully will set our ribs apart from the rest And the total weight of everything in the bin here so far will be 20,000 grams. And this cure goes in at a rate of 0.25% of the total weight. So that is going to be 50 grams of this cure. Now I want to get all of this stuff completely dissolved, and I'll get it on the meat there, slosh everything around very well. Perfect, everything is covered up. Just gonna shake that about for a little bit. Make sure everything gets stirred around. And the meat on here is so thin that I'm only gonna have to cure these, I think, for about a day and a half, which is fine, because that's all I have. And I don't even need to get a full cure on these because I'm going to be cooking this hot. So even if I don't get a full cure, that is, if the cure doesn't penetrate all the way through the meat, it's still going to have a tremendous effect on the color of these. And because it's going to be a hot cook, there's not going to be any kind of risk of contamination anyway. All right, now we'll get these into the refrigerator. And the next thing we'll do is talk about how I'm gonna season these up. And I think I've come up with a seasoning blend that is gonna be original and pretty unique. Originally, when I thought that I was going to be working with some nice meaty plate ribs, the plan was to cure those and then coat those with seasonings and essentially make pastrami on the bone. And I did a test run and those things came out fantastic. That might be a recipe for the channel somewhere down the road. But then when I got the less meaty ribs, I tried it out and the spices were a little bit overpowering for the meat. So I've changed these spices up and came up with a variation that is pretty wild. It tastes great. It's got a similar theme to the pastrami. It's still pretty powerful on the spices, but it works a little better with the thinner rib. So when we're making a pastrami, the base spices are kind of black peppercorns, coriander, and mustard seed. And then there's some other spices that go into that as well. And that black pepper is really strong. So for these thinner ribs, I'm gonna begin with white pepper, which is a little more floral than black pepper, not quite as spicy, doesn't have quite the same bite. White pepper used a lot in Asian cuisine, so that steered me into a whole Szechuan bend on the pastrami theme. So I've decided to go with some Szechuan peppercorn. And if you've never tried these, they have a really nice bright and floral flavor, but they also have a very interesting tongue-numbing effect. They kind of make your tongue tingle for a little while after eating them. And in a lot of very spicy Szechuan dishes, these are used to kind of combat that heat. I really like them, so I'm gonna use these. I'm gonna kind of go 2 parts white peppercorn to 1 part Szechuan peppercorn. And to still hold on to some of that pastrami theme, I'm gonna add in some coriander. Oh, probably, let's just go ahead and go equal parts coriander and Szechuan peppercorn. So now we're at 2 parts white pepper and 1 part each Szechuan peppercorn and coriander. And I'll also go ahead and add in some black peppercorns. Not a whole lot though. Probably just half as much again as those coriander and Szechuan peppercorn. And apart from these, I'm gonna add in a little bit of star anise, and this I'm gonna grind up in my coffee grinder. And then after I've ground all this, I'm gonna add it in separately. I wanna be very careful how much of this I add in. It can be off-putting to some people, so I don't wanna add too much in there. I'm just gonna add it in and stir it in until I get a very faint scent of this. And I'll also add in some garlic powder. And that's gonna be the bulk of the spice blend that I'm gonna use. I will treat the ribs a little bit with some sesame oil and some hoisin sauce, and then I'm gonna sprinkle just a little bit of Korean chili flake on them before I put the spices on. But for now, I'm gonna get these toasted up and then put a very rough grind on them. I'm just gonna toast these dry in a pan, keep them moving around over kind of medium heat until they start to get really aromatic. The coriander will probably start popping on you like popcorn, and then you're gonna be good to go. There we go. Now, I'm gonna let these things cool all the way down to room temperature. And then I got way too much to put in the coffee grinder, so I'm gonna try a little food processor to grind them up. Like I said, I'm not gonna try to grind them fine anyway, so that should work out well. I'm gonna keep these moving until that pan cools down a little bit though. But if they get overdone, I will ruin them. Now that is the best smelling bird seed around. I got most of the stuff. It looks like it's the black peppercorns mainly. So what I think I'm gonna do is just throw this into a freezer bag and smack it a bit with a hammer, and that'll be good. But first, I've got my star anise. Like I said, this is very strong, so I'm gonna add this in just like a half teaspoon at a time, and then I'll just smell it. It's not going to take very much of that. I'll add in a tablespoon or two of garlic powder. Not really concerned how much because garlic is great. Let me just spin that around a tiny bit. It smells great. I might need a little bit more, but it's hard to say. I can't go too heavy on those ribs or you're just not even gonna notice there's any meat at all. There. That's what I was after. Real coarse grind. I want crispy bits in there, but not a ton of whole peppercorns. A few of them here and there is going to be just fine. But yeah, that looks nice to me. Hopefully that's enough, but I can always whip up a little more on the fly. All right, so here are my ribs. This is after about 40 hours in that curing solution, which I think will be plenty for this thin bit of meat on these Depression era ribs. So now, I'm gonna pat that off of there. Dry them up just a little bit. Now I am not even gonna attempt to pull any membrane off of this. You can see that if I do, these things are probably just gonna fall apart right now, and if they don't, they're definitely gonna fall apart when they're cooking. So I'm gonna leave that membrane on there even though it's not ideal. Everybody's working with the same product, so that's the way it's gonna be for me and probably for everybody else. So I'm gonna get this started with a little base coat of flavoring, and what I've got here is just some off-the-shelf hoisin sauce, some Chinese barbecue sauce, and I've added in a little bit of chili flake to give it a tiny bit of heat, not too much for the masses. I've added in some sesame oil for flavor and also to keep it from burning. So I'm just gonna put a light coating of that on here. Well, that's gonna help my spice blend stick on there. And Add a nice sweet and spiciness to this. And that sesame smells really good too. Now here's my spice blend. And I'm just gonna put a light dusting of that on the bottom side of these. There's really nothing to eat on there. Okay, let's flip those over. And then the same thing on this side. I'm gonna make sure though I get in between all of these, because that is where the one bite of meat is on these. I'm getting really interested to see what everybody's gonna do with these ribs. And this is a pretty unique competition where you do all your prep and really you can do all or most of your cooking at home, because you can't go set up and cook out there overnight. And a lot of people are doing briskets, and you know how long those take. So you really have to cook those at home and then bring them down there. And that's why I was able to cure these, and that actually takes a lot of pressure off. There we go. Just a little basting of that base coat. And then I'm gonna hit this side pretty heavily with the seasoning. Get down in between every bone. Now that smells awesome. I want to get a lot of those big crunchy bits on there. That'll give them at least a little something to chew on. All right, I'm gonna get these out into the refrigerator to air dry. There we go. I've got 12 racks of these total. I believe we give 1 rack to the judges and the rest are for people to sample. I'm going to leave them out here in the fridge. I think I got about 7 hours until I want to get started cooking these. Not really sure how long these are going to take. Probably between 4 and 5 hours. I'm just going to give myself 6 hours to work with. And hope for the best. It is very early in the morning and I have just gotten these in here, so I'm hustling to get the smoker back up to temperature. I'm going to be cooking these between 225 and 250 degrees Fahrenheit the whole way through this cook. And I'm going to let them go like this until they get a nice crust on them, probably between 2 and 3 hours. And then I'm going to go ahead and wrap these in foil because I'm sure they're going to dry out. I may even need to put some water in those packets because there's not a lot of actual moisture to come out of these ribs. We'll just have to wait and see how they look and feel at that point and go from there. And I am running pecan wood today. Just at under 3 hours now, and I got a nice little crust going on there, but they're still looking kind of juicy. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that foil wrap on these guys. I'm gonna work just as quick as I can so I don't lose much heat. We'll get those back in there. We're gonna go nice and low and slow. I want to put a temperature probe in one of these, and we're gonna cook these just up to right about 200 degrees Fahrenheit internal. All right, it's just about time to go. We're gonna transfer these into a cooler and then drive them down and put them onto some smokers that are on site. We'll keep them warm there for a little while until it's time to serve them up, and then we'll open these up, throw a little sweet chili sauce on them just for a few minutes until that gets nice and hot, and then we'll send them out.
To claim you, to put my flag on your ground, but that ain't so. No, honey, I don't wanna cage you, don't even wanna tame you. Just want you to say that you're mine.
We're gonna do the best rib with a score of 55.5 points out of a possible score of 60 between our 4 judges. Slabtown BMX. Come on up, dude. Get your picture taker. Go. Congratulations, Slabtown.
Hey! Hey! All right!
Hey now! What do you know about that? We took the prize for best ribs. Not too shabby for a group of first-time competitors. And I was told that our score put us in the top 3 for best in show, even though we were the only team out there that didn't do any brisket. And I think that is about as good a result as we could have hoped for. I've never had any interest in competitive cooking, but I'll always help friends out if I'm able, and this was for a good cause. My friends are out here raising funds to bring back a BMX racetrack that was kind of a big thing in a small town for most of my life out here. There were races out there in the summer, and it was open to the public when they weren't holding events. And eventually, they stopped holding events there, but it stayed open as a public track for many years after that. But with no money for upkeep, it fell into disrepair, and ultimately it was flattened for liability reasons. And when I was a kid, we were like little savages, and if you went out and dusted yourself up, well, that was on you. But now, in more litigious times, it seems like old-fashioned fun is being replaced with screens, and the kids are running out of wholesome and healthy activities. So check out Slabtown BMX, and if you feel like helping out, you can use this QR code or click the link here or in the description, and if you kick these folks a few bucks, they would really appreciate the help. This competition turned out to be way more fun than I would have ever thought it could be. I had free reign to get creative and do whatever I wanted with the recipe, and when I got those ridiculous ribs to work with, the whole thing just felt kind of comical, and I felt right at home and relaxed, so I had a great time formulating and realizing that recipe. Now, do I recommend making this recipe at home? Certainly not with ribs like those, but if you've got some actual meaty ribs, the test ribs I made were fantastic. And maybe I'll make a video of that at some point, but right now I've been going for just about 36 hours straight, and I'm too dang tired to even think about that. But the real question is, do I retire on top or go back next year to defend the title and take that Best in Show prize? Well, you're just gonna have to stay tuned to find out. Thanks for watching.